Thanks for coming, everyone. I did, in fact, ride my bike here. On the way from Silverton, it started to snow. I don't know if you know, but there are 2 passes over 10,000 feet in between Silverton and Durango. I chose to ignore that fact. Did have one lovely night of camping in Mineral Creek, just outside of Silverton. The last time I was in Durango was 2011. I brought a group of teenagers to what was then called the Durango Hometown Hostel, which I believe no longer exists. And all of these teens were attempting to write their own novels in the month of November. We stole the idea, which is called NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And so we would diligently work on each of our novels. Then we would walk into town to eat ice cream and probably visit Maria's, and then come back and do some more writing. There might have been teenagers writing on roofs. I can neither confirm nor deny this rumor. The reason that I chose Durango for that event was the same reason that I've chosen to live in lots of mountain towns, because mountain town people are obsessed with a certain question that I've also been obsessed with, which is, how do you spend a lot of time playing in the outdoors while also having a life that is basically secure? Seems like a simple question, but once you start talking to people in mountain towns, you realize it's actually very, very complicated. I find this question so interesting, I eventually started to interview people who seem to have found an answer. People who have found this magical combination of work and free time and adventure, and that became the Dirtbag Rich podcast, and that's what informed the book, which is Dirtbag Rich. I've interviewed people as young as 26, as old as 76, and gotten a lot of different stories about how you make this goal work, how you continue to enjoy the outdoors after moving to an outdoor town. And just to jump to the punchline, this is what I discovered. The people who I call Dirtbag Rich have found this magical combination of time, money, and purpose. And the status quo, as indicated in this illustration, is to worry mostly about making money. And don't worry too much about having time. Don't worry too much about whether your work is purposeful or your entire life feels that purposeful, because you can reclaim time and purpose in this mythical era known as retirement. That's when you can have it all. That's when you can go birding, drive the RV, whatever it might be that you do to connect with the outdoors. The Dirtbag Rich are people who are not satisfied with that proposition. They want it all. They want time, money, and purpose in greater equivalence, and they want it right now. So here are some of the people who I ended up interviewing. Some of them were classic van life, rock climber, dirtbag types, like Brittany, who does part-time graphic design. Some of them have outdoor jobs in nature, but still live close to cities, like Aisha, who sleeps in her SUV in her boyfriend's driveway. Some people are programmers who cannot stand being in front of a computer for too long, and so they will sometimes ship a laptop to themselves as a Dropbox on the thru hike that they're doing on the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail, like David did. There are people like Jenny, who's a really talented writer and spends most of her free time scrambling up and down mountains. She just became a Patagonia trail running ambassador. There's Mia, who's a climber who lives in Bishop and photographs other climbers in Yosemite. Justin is a friend of mine who got me into dance and is a big-time mountaineer. He makes his money by organizing intense dance festivals, and then in his free time goes back into the mountains. Hannah is someone who I met cycling through Seattle, and I met her through the website Warm Showers, which is like couch surfing, but for cyclists. And she has a sweet gig with Seattle Public Schools. She is a speech-language therapist, and in her contract, after every 3 years of full-time work, she's allowed to take 1 year off, unpaid, but with job security. And so this is a picture I actually took when she and I and another friend of ours were cycling down in Patagonia in early 2024. There are people like Michael who live in Hood River, Oregon, kayaks all the time and manages raft guides. He works for a very normal guiding company. There's people like Kaya, who was a van life climber, but then settled down in Moab. She co-founded Moab's first climbing gym. She's probably there right now. And now she's the one who has a house and who hosts all the dirtbag climbers who show up in her driveway. There are people with kids, too. Ed and Jocelyn are public school teachers in Canada, and they've taken their 2 sons on bike tours in Cuba, in Southeast Asia, all over Europe. They've taken those kids places. Victoria is a single mom in New Zealand who does marketing work and also took her 9-year-old daughter, Emily, on the Te Awaroa, which is like the Pacific Crest Trail of New Zealand. 5 months of fairly hardcore hiking. They did it together. Tracy and Andy are a family who sail with their teenage kids and sometimes run away to do a little bit of IT consulting and then come back to the boat. They tell me that their kids like to hang out with other boat kids and form these roving pirate gangs. Brendan is a jack of all trades. He's also someone who created a popular website you might have seen before, semirad.com. And he does these wonderful illustrations. And I was lucky enough to get Brendan to do illustrations for my book. And so if you see any of the cool little line drawings, he did those. All of these people have found their own balance of time, money, and purpose. But let me get a little bit more specific about what this means. Time means that they have been able to block off a lot of free time for themselves. Sometimes it's on a weekly basis or a monthly or a yearly basis. And they're often very flexible with their time too. Like Brendan, who I just mentioned, is able to drop his kid off at daycare and then go for a trail run up in Missoula, Montana, where he lives, and come back in a couple of hours, do his work, and still be there to pick up the kid at the appropriate time. So he's got that kind of flexibility, whereas other people like Hannah are able to take an entire year off to go bicycle touring. As far as money goes, each of these people has figured out some way to make a decent amount of money in a relatively short effort. And so that could be a high hourly rate for something that you're doing in a freelance way. It could be working really intensively for a number of weeks or months and then earning a lot of money that you save and then not having to work for many more months after that. One way or another, they don't have to work year-round full-time. And then finally, on the purpose side, when I use the phrase deep purpose in the subtitle of the book, I'm talking about having purpose in your paid work and also purpose in what you do recreationally. Because if you're someone who moves to a mountain town so you can do stuff in the mountains, but your job is sucking all of your energy and life and you just dread Monday morning, that's not a very sustainable situation. And specifically, dirtbag rich people are obsessed with nature. Some people said, well, can you be a writer or an artist or, I don't know, someone else who's not that into nature, but you still really care about time, money, and purpose? And I said, yes, absolutely. I fully support that. But there's something special about this obsession with nature that connects who we call dirtbags. The original dirtbags were people in the 1960s and 70s in Yosemite Valley who would refuse to take jobs, would refuse to have normal houses, would sometimes eat cat food or dumpster dive food or eat, grab food that was left in the Ahwahnee Lodge. And they would do that because the spiritual element of rock climbing for them was so significant. And so while I totally support anyone who can find a magical balance of time, money, and purpose, my research was specifically focused on people who dedicate their time and their energy, and they find their purpose in nature. But we can still generalize a little bit more about what makes the dirtbag rich tick. They are people who, on a majority of mornings, wake up and say, I get to do this thing today, instead of I have to do this thing today. And so this is not about avoiding work, avoiding responsibility, even profound responsibilities, but instead waking up and looking forward to the hard thing that you get to do that day. Waking up and looking forward to the ridiculous run or bike ride or paddle or whatever adventure you've signed yourself up for, waking up in some freezing tent somewhere. As long as you get to say, I get to, then you are on the path to dirtbag rich. I was not born on this path. I came from California suburbia and a very normal, like go to school, do well kind of upbringing. And my first exposure to this I get to philosophy was at this wilderness summer camp called Deer Crossing in California, kind of near Lake Tahoe. And the camp director, Jim, there he is with me, age 11, he met me and he said, Blake, what are your goals? And I said, I'm 11, I don't have goals. And he said, well, if you want to do amazing things in life, he's kind of an Indiana Jones type. He said, you need to have goals. And I was like, oh, okay. And this camp was a very strange and magical place. And it got me thinking, okay, if I have goals, then I can wake up excited to do hard stuff. That was step number one. Step number two was going away to college, getting away from Bakersfield, California, where I grew up, and getting to go to college with a bunch of people who were super motivated to learn the stuff that they were learning. And that got me super motivated too. I was originally going to be a scientist, but I discovered alternative education in college and got deeply motivated by it. I was so enthusiastic about it, I designed my own major to study alternative education theory. And every morning I woke up and I was like, I get to learn this stuff. Amazing. I also lived in this student co-op where we had really excellent parties. It was a place with especially motivated people. That's me on the right there, unhygienically preparing a Caesar salad. Yes, for one of our food parties. After college, I wanted to work outdoors. I wanted to do summer camp year-round. And so I got hired in outdoor education. In California, there's a really big outdoor education market. It's mandated that all 5th or 6th graders do a week of outdoor ed. And so I started working with school groups coming up from LA. A lot of kids had never seen a deer before. They were so psyched to be there. I was psyched to work with them. And at the same time, a group would come each week. I would learn their names. We would develop some rapport, and then they would leave. And it kind of felt like a grind after doing this for a few seasons. So the next thing was I got to burn it all down, radically reduce my possessions to what you see right there, and run away to South America for 3 months. I highly recommend running away to a foreign continent at least once in your life for at least a few months. This really helped me figure some stuff out. And when I came back, I was super motivated to not go back and work for someone else, but instead to start my own thing. So I started a travel company for teenagers who don't go to school. It's called Unschool Adventures. This was our first group going to Argentina for 6 weeks. And it was pretty magical for me because I got to keep traveling. I got to work with really cool teenagers who wanted to be there. And I got to learn about how these mysterious unschoolers, these self-directed learners, operated. On that first trip, I came back with $4,000 in profit. I felt like a king. I was like, I've made it. That's it. We're done. That was 2008. I kept running these trips, and as I got to continue hanging out with these teenagers, I got to have source material for writing about self-directed learning and unschooling and homeschooling and all this alternative education stuff. So I had a part-time thing as an author on the side, but mostly I was able to make money running these trips for teenagers, which if I just did 1 or 2 or 3 of these trips a year, I'd be working about 10 or 15 weeks out of the year, and the rest of the year was mine to play with, as long as I could not spend too much money on whatever I was doing for play. And essentially, I've been doing that ever since 2008. That's a picture of me with a teenager in Greece, Meteora, Greece. Yes, I took a group to Greece and Turkey last year for 6 weeks. And with my free time, I spend a lot of it dedicated to friends. I spend a lot of time hanging out in nature and going on adventures. And in the past few years, I've gotten really into partner dance. And there's a really wonderful partner dance scene out in Europe. That's where I've been the past couple of years. It's good to be back in the US, though. Food is very expensive, but otherwise, everything is still quite lovely in the nature realm. But back when I had that quarter-life crisis, that age 25, oh no, what am I doing? I read a bunch of books, and none of them quite gave me what I was looking for. There was the entrepreneurial books that tell you how to make money and tell you how to become successful in sometimes shady ways. There were the books that were very nature-based and very romantic and very like, just go out and reconnect with nature. And I'm like, that's cool, but how do you afford to do that? It's that mountain town question again. You move to the mountain town so you have access to nature. At the same time, it's quite expensive to be in most mountain towns, and you need to work to make money. I wanted someone to tell me how you put these two things together. Of course, if something doesn't exist, then that's your opportunity to write the book. And the reason it's called Dirtbag Rich is because I think that both being a dirtbag, a total like, I don't care, I'm just going for it, I'm living outdoors, I'm eating cat food, and then the standard American dream of becoming rich, I don't think either one of these is a sustainable dream. Here's why. If you're a dirtbag, you have lots of free time, wonderful, and you have very little money. If you're going for the standard dream of becoming rich, the opposite is true. If you're a dirtbag, you are lacking security and comfort. There's a good chance you are sleeping in the dirt in a bag. If you're going for the standard dream of becoming rich, you have security and comfort, but you might have too much security and comfort that you get adjusted to, and then you stop going out into nature because all of a sudden things are sharp and pointy and too hot and too cold. Dirtbags get to use their bodies, moving in nature. That's awesome. If you are really focused on making money, that's a gravitational well that pulls you in towards sitting and screens. What dirtbags say they love most about the outdoors is not necessarily the outdoors, but the community that comes together. And that's really great. And that's really great, especially when you're in your 20s. But then once you're a dirtbag becomes in your 30s or your 40s, you start looking around and you're like, where did all my friends go? And they're like, yeah, we have kids. We have real jobs. We have obligations. You're still out there climbing or cycling or whatever. And so it's community for a while. And the standard dream of becoming rich is not ideal either, because what I notice in my life is that as soon as people start making more money, they use it to purchase more privacy. And more privacy leads eventually to more isolation. That's why I think becoming a dirtbag has a high potential for burnout, and trying to just become rich also has a high potential for burnout. So how do you not burn out? If only we could combine these two words into a single catchy title for a book. I wanted to know, can we have it all? Can you have free time and connection to nature and meaningful work, but not too much meaningful work? Can you still have a functional body and have enough money and enough savings to not be living on the edge like the prototypical dirtbag, but not so much money that that's all you're working toward? And crucially, can you do all this without relying upon a trust fund, a spouse or a partner who's providing a lot of money for you, or the bank of mom and dad? Not because it's necessarily wrong to take money from any of these sources. It's just for the interviews that I was doing, I wanted to have a sort of level playing field so that I knew that everyone was creating something more or less from the ground up. So that's Dirtbag Rich. This is the book I wish existed when I was 25. Wouldn't have had to go through all this suffering in order to get here. I'm just kidding about that. And I say 25 because in the short time I do spend on social media, I see lots of videos like these where people say, how am I expected to go to an office and work all the time when all I want to do is be out here in nature? I think it's an extremely valid question. And if you've ever seen a graph like this before, it's a pretty shocking reality. This graph of how costs have changed over time, over the past 20 or 30 years, shows that if you want to buy a television, you're in luck, because televisions have become much, much cheaper over time. But if you want to purchase any human services, like, I don't know, college or healthcare, then things have gotten a lot more challenging. And so you're totally justified if you are a younger person saying, oh, this whole dirtbag rich dream is cool, but like, don't you realize that everything is way more expensive now? It's just impossible. You have to go and grind as hard as possible. And maybe if you are in a romantic relationship with someone else who grinds as hard as possible, then maybe you can afford a starter home in Durango and a pair of skis and an e-mountain bike, because apparently those are standard now. It's a very, if you look at it this way, you're like, this is a very impossible situation. And so I cover all of these topics in the book, and especially the pricey human services. If you have kids and you need childcare, how do you provide that? If you have parents or other family members who are dependents and you need to care for them, how do you do that? Housing, oof. There are some people who choose not to live in regular houses. There are some people who live temporarily on bikes. There are some people who move abroad to save money. There are some people like Kaya, who I mentioned, who they were dirtbags, and then they decide to rent or buy a house in a very popular outdoorsy place and immediately fill it up with as many roommates as possible who can pay their mortgage or their monthly rent. There are ways to do this, but yes, you have to be extremely creative and extremely intentional. This book does not offer solutions to the cost of living crisis, just a few directions to start looking in. And some of these situations that people find are dire. So Courtney, for example, is someone who I interviewed who both she and her husband are totally self-employed, totally freelance. And Courtney had a very serious cancer scare. And she had to navigate that without having like standard employer-provided health care. And what she told me, and what's in the book, is she said, I'm sure glad I had three things. I did have a bare-bones health care policy. I did have a rainy day fund, which we drained for the, paying for these surgeries. And my clients were super understanding. And she said, thanks to all three of these things, my husband and I were able to weather this, and we didn't have to go and get like a normal job. It was a big event, but we're still doing what we did before. And there's someone like Diana, who's like a total vagabond, nomad, bum. She's an outdoor guide. She loves to travel, and she's dirtbag rich. And when her grandfather died and her family needed her to come back and be there to help do stuff for the family, her time flexibility allowed her to drop everything and just go right back and be with her family for multiple months. That's something that's very hard to do when you have a full-time job and full-time commitments. And so this is why I say dirtbag rich is not just about like finding a way to have everything for yourself. It's still very relational. And in case you're wondering, the kind of people who end up doing this are extremely non-normal individuals. And I want to read you a quick excerpt from the book where I talk about the kind of people who show up in this dirtbag rich scheme. Okay, bear with me here. 2 centuries of modernity have gifted you with a deep skepticism of traditional purpose. The 1960s cranked the volume, and more recent developments like climate change, rapid globalization, and serial financial crises delivered you to the doorstep of the life you're now leading, the choices you're now making, and the confusion you now feel about your purpose on this earth. There are additional reasons that some of us take the path I am both promoting to you and defending to myself. Perhaps we are reacting to painful or disorganized upbringings by attaching ourselves to seemingly pure entities like wilderness that won't betray us. Perhaps we glorify thrift because we are genuinely incapable of earning more than our parents or cannot bear the thought of making the same trade-offs they made. Perhaps our obsession with physical activity masks our eating disorders, body image issues, or a need to feel superior. Perhaps there's some seriously atypical neurology baked into our cakes. Perhaps we delay or reject parenthood because we fear the costs, consequences, and culture of bringing children into the world, and we haven't found many role models worth emulating. Perhaps we continue our endless migrations because we don't like who we become when we're stationary, because we wish to avoid the uglier, harder, and boring sides of life, or because we don't want to be forced to witness the world's profound sameness, illness, and sadness. Almost certainly, much of this is outside of our control. Zoom out far enough, and these are the uncharted edges of our map. Like the seekers who came before us, we are reconnoitering new territory, unsure of which dragons lay beyond. Yeah, this is not for everyone. And a lot of people, when I started talking about alternative education earlier in life, they said, not everyone can drop out of school, not everyone can go to an alternative school. And I said, yes, I agree, absolutely. Let's keep the public school system. That's very important. And so when I started talking about dirtbag rich, I already kind of knew what people were going to say, which is, well, not everyone can do this. Not everyone can strike this magical balance of time, money, and purpose. And I said, yes, I agree. This is not something for everyone. This is for some very strange people with some very significant hang-ups. And as I summarize it in the book, this dirtbag rich path seems to be best fitted for people who are moderately privileged and highly idealistic. Moderately privileged means, in my interviews, I didn't notice a lot of people who are very, very wealthy taking this path, nor did I notice a lot of people who are coming from very, very low resource backgrounds taking this path. If you're coming from a very wealthy background, there's probably a lot of pressure on you not to mess around and just go get the best high-paying job you can, because that is the family expectation. And that expectation is often paralleled on the other side of the income spectrum, which is don't mess around with this wandering stuff. Just go get the best job that you can. And so somehow it's these people in the broad middle, the people who have some security net, some cushion, but also are gifted or cursed with this very high idealism, who want to have this romantic connection to nature, who want to have a deep sense of purpose in their work and in their careers, who don't just want to go to a job and make money, who don't just want to move to Denver, they want to live in Durango. I'm not going to live in the Front Range. No, I'm going to be a Southwestern person. Some of my friends on the political left say, this dirtbag rich thing sounds good. Let's make sure everyone can do it. And they talk about the future revolution to come, which could be an AI type thing. It could be like a political revolution. My favorite iteration of this is actually a title of a book, is fully automated luxury communism. Once we have that, then we can all work less and live more. Hey, sounds great. Might be kind of far in the future. I prefer to look backwards because there's actually some evidence that there's a lot of people who could be living dirtbag rich right now. So there's this famous economist from 100 years ago named John Maynard Keynes, and he made this prediction in 1930 that 100 years later, people in richer countries like his United Kingdom would be 8 times wealthier, and everyone would just be working 15 hours a week to cover the basics. Was he right or was he wrong? He was both right and wrong. So modern-day economists have fact-checked his prediction, and actually, speaking in averages, we are more than 8 times wealthier, materially speaking, than what Keynes predicted. But clearly, most people are not working 15 hours a week. Most of us are still working 40 hours a week or more. And today, it's the people in the highest income tiers that actually work the highest number of hours. The economist Claudia Golden, she got famous for talking about greedy jobs. And greedy jobs don't mean that you are a greedy person. It means that the job is greedy for your time. And this is a result of globalization. It's a result of people who are going to be making very big decisions that might have ramifications in all these different time zones. It means you can never ignore your cell phone if you want to be one of these top earners. You are always available. So clearly, 15 hours a week is not a reality. But for some of the people who I interviewed for Dirtbag Rich, it is a reality. A lot of the people who you met earlier, they're working 10 or 15 or 20 hours a week when averaged over the entire year. When I went back to try to crunch the numbers for myself, I realized that throughout most of my 20s and 30s, if you averaged it over the year, I was working something like 15 hours a week. Now, when I was taking those teenagers on trips, it felt like I was grinding pretty hard. You have to be available 24/7 for these kids. All sorts of weird stuff can happen in foreign countries with other people's teenagers. I can tell you some stories. But then I would have my free time. And that was the precious part of this equation. The reason that John Maynard Keynes' prediction largely did not come true is that he undervalued how much people pay attention to social status, how much we cue off of what other people in our social groups, our social strata, have or don't have. Essentially, we try to keep up with the Joneses. It's an extremely powerful thing. And so I argue in the book that if you have to keep up with the Joneses in any way, if you have to compare yourself to others, you should try to compare not what stuff your neighbors have to you, but how much freedom your neighbors have to you. And freedom is not just this abstract, Wild West, hyper-individualistic, pew, pew, pew type of freedom. Freedom means freedom to do stuff that's meaningful to you. And sometimes this means friendship and family. Sometimes it means reading books and writing books. For me, it's a lot about dance and travel. And probably for a lot of people here, it's about being out in nature. This is the point. To do this now, because that old equation of like, just make money now, and then later when you're retired, you can have time and purpose. People who are super into the outdoors know that you are not necessarily going to be able to do all the stuff you want to do at retirement. This is another reason why Dirtbag Rich is about nature to me, and not just about anyone who's finding time, money, and purpose. Because if you're really into making art, for example, you can do that for most of your life. If you really want to hike the Continental Divide Trail or the Colorado Trail, you should probably do that pretty soon. Maybe sooner than you expect. I wanted to read you one more passage from the book, which talks about how difficult it is to ignore social expectations. It's really easy to say, oh, just don't compare yourself to others. Maybe if it's just like your friends who you're dealing with, that's one thing. But what if it's your kid who is pressuring you to make more money? So this is Russell Max Simon, and he has a teenage son. He and the mother are divorced, and they've been living apart for a while. So when the son comes to visit him, the son is often coming from a much, let's say, a higher income strata than what Russell, who's kind of a dirtbag climber, tends to live in. And so here's something that happened between Russell and his son. I'm quoting Russell now. "The more difficult thing has been explaining all this to my son, who grew up attending a school with other kids who have lots of money. He started looking around and wondering why I rented the smallest house in the neighborhood, why I drive a used Honda, and why I spend most of my time climbing. When he was 8, he started asking me, 'Daddy, why don't you make more money? Why don't you go get more business?' And I had to explain to him over and over again, 'I have enough money, kiddo. Do you see how much time I spend doing things I want to do? What would I do with more money?' And then he would say, 'Well, buy a Tesla.' And I'm like, 'Yeah, those are cool, but I really like my Honda.' Even if I had $1 million, I wouldn't spend $100,000 on a sports car. This is the main challenge I face, swimming against the cultural waves that make my son question the idea that I really do feel wealthy, happy, and fulfilled with less money than all the other people in our neighborhood." Back in 2018, I hiked the Sierra High Route with a few of my good friends from Wilderness Summer Camp. This is a route that's mostly off-trail, that goes through the highest part of the Sierra Nevada. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's hardcore. It parallels the John Muir Trail. There's very few people out there. I'm really glad that I did this over the course of 2 weeks then, because since then, my back has become super unreliable. I'm very frustrated with it. But I can no longer go out into the deep backcountry and feel 100% confident that I could get myself out if I needed to. I stay a little bit closer to the front country now. If I had a normal life, a normal job, could I have taken 2 weeks off to go on a High Sierra backpacking adventure with my old friends? Yeah. If I had a normal job that would have used up all my vacation time, it probably would have been more difficult, and I certainly wouldn't have been doing the other stuff, the other running and backpacking that prepared me to be able to do this kind of adventure. So I think it would have been less likely. But for me, this is what being dirtbag rich is about, is being able to live whatever your dream is, especially if it's an outdoorsy type dream, now, 20s, 30s, 40s, just like any time before death. Just doing it now. Not waiting, not putting all this faith into the mythical land of retirement. And to wrap this up, I got a question at the last talk that I did in Silverton at the deli. I love the fact that I talked at a deli. And the person who was hosting the talk, she said, my son asked me this at the dinner table the other day, which is like, how do you even know when you're rich? How do you know when you're wealthy? And she said, what's your answer to that question? And I said, I'm glad you asked. That's a chapter in my book. And essentially, this is how I define it. I think that you are rich when you have serious depth and quality of personal relationships. That is the ultimate form of wealth right there. When you can count the nights that you've slept under the stars, and I don't want to just make this about backpacking or about camping out, because some people don't want to backpack or camp out. Choose a different metric, like number of epic downhills on my mountain bike, number of miles that I've driven in my truck, whatever it might be that like really lights you up, that makes you think like, oh, I'm so glad that I did this thing. This is what it's all about. That is your metric for knowing how rich you are. It's about doing work that matters to other people, like meaningful, impactful work, not just working to make money. So these books that I've written about alternative education, it's really hard when you're a writer to know like if anyone's even listening or anyone's reading what you write. But every now and then I get an email from a parent or sometimes from a teenager or a young adult who had read one of my books and said, I was really struggling in school and now I'm like thriving and your book was part of the reason that I'm having a better life. And I'm just like melting on the floor reading these emails. And I have this Gmail category that I file it under called nice notes. And if I'm ever, let's say like, in a hospital bed for a long time, I'm going to go back to nice notes. I'm going to read all those again. Historical perspective. This means just join me on a thought experiment. If you were born 100 years ago or 500 years ago into the same body, into the same, let's say, like social class, how good would your life be compared to how good it is today? It's a tricky question to answer, but for most people, the answer is much better today than 500 years ago or 100 years ago. And so this is something that is not meant to delude you from like actual problems that you face, but it's a way to remember that even if you make less money than other people, even significantly less money, it's like historically and probably globally speaking, like you're extremely wealthy. Like we are incredibly privileged, a lot of us. And finally, how many moments have you had recently where you told yourself in the middle of this thing happening or just after it happened, this was so amazing, I could die right now. I could happily die. It's not because you want to die. It's just like, if I got hit by a bus right now, knowing that this thing just happened, this is how I know that I'm doing life correctly. I had one of these after going to a friend's dance weekend in Belgium a year and a half ago. And it was just filled with like good people, good food, time in nature, dancing, cuddling, good conversations. There was a hot tub. And I left that weekend thinking like, this is it. This is as good as it gets. I could just die right now. Again, it's not because we want to die. We want to live long, fulfilling lives. But we want to have as many I could die now moments as possible. That's how you know you're wealthy. And all of this, everything you see right here, is pretty unrelated to money. Money does matter, but not nearly as much as the standard narrative tells us. That's what the book Dirtbag Rich is all about. And if you enjoyed this, you can grab a copy. Apparently there's still 15 copies left. And if you want to hear more from me, I have a newsletter and the podcast is still active. And that's my website, blakeboles.com. You can always reach out to me. Thanks for coming to the talk, everyone. I'm happy to take other questions. I'm especially interested in like challenging and critical questions. And if you are willing to be audio recorded, this might end up on my podcast, you can speak into this microphone with your question. You are empowered.
So I'm Mark. I'm a big fan. I live in Santa Fe. I came here on my way to Telluride, but I stopped in Durango to see this.
Cool.
So like podcast, I don't have your book yet. I'm going to get it today. But I'm also a Marxist. Mm-hmm. So my question is like taking kind of the Buddhist bodhisattva idea, like where does the idea that like you living dirtbag rich yourself stop? And then this like duty to negate that to like help other people do it as well. Like, can you balance those two? Like the self-negation idea, like just, I think you understand. I think we're vibing right now, but like,
I feel the vibe.
How much should you just like really have as many nights under the stars as you can and as many miles in your truck or all the examples you gave versus like help other people, like get out of the grind and like get out of shitty lives. So I think that's a great question. And it is addressed in the book. And one of the stories that I bring up is my old college friend, Jeff, who he was into meditation and Eastern philosophy stuff back when I met him. But then as I kind of followed his development, he tried to do this classic route of helping other people by getting a PhD in development economics and like helping people in poor countries, raise their economies up. And he just became totally disillusioned with that path. And he went back to meditation and he ended up becoming an ordained Buddhist monk. And he spent a lot of time down in Brazil and he decided to become a wandering Buddhist monk. And so most monks will just stay in the confines and comfort of a monastery. And a wandering monk is out there on the road, having taken these Buddhist vows that say, like, I'm not going to carry food, I'm not going to carry shelter. Like, I am truly putting myself out there at the mercy of the world. And so in the mornings, he will like go and beg for food. So he doesn't go too far away from established areas. And then in the afternoons, he'll walk or he'll meditate or he will talk with anyone who seems interested in talking with him. And I quote him in the book because I interviewed him for this. And he said, I think what people need more than a lecture is they need to see a living example of something. And in his case, he's trying to be a living example of kindness, of humility, and of this like openness and vulnerability to the world. And my hat is off to him. Like being on a bike is like so incredibly posh compared to walking the streets of rural Brazil, just hoping that someone's going to feed you and maybe put you up for the night. And so that's one approach, and really that's a bodhisattva approach. That's he's there for other people's enlightenment in the long run. I also discussed the question of kids, of whether to have kids in the book. And that's a super active question in my life. And I feel really lucky to have been able to work with a bunch of other people's teenagers in like a summer camp role, outdoor educator, international travel leader role, because I can do stuff with those people's kids that they could not do, the parents could not do with their own kids. And I can play this role, this kind of crazy uncle / like the trip leader who brings you to a foreign country and says like, go talk to people on the streets, go. I've literally done that. I've done that in Germany and Mexico and Southeast Asia. Recently took a group to Valencia, Spain, and it was about learning Spanish in many different ways. And one of those ways to go up was to go up and have conversations with strangers. And these kids are so intimidated by this in the beginning, and then they kind of get over it. And I'm probably the only person in their life who's bringing them to a foreign country and being like, talk to strangers, go, do it. And I feel like this, in my own small way, is like my act of service for other people's kids. That could justify me choosing not to have kids. This could all be an elaborate cover-up for like my lack of like economic prowess, the ability to make enough money to actually have kids these days. I totally admit that. But I think that there are lots of ways to be of genuine service to
humanity, to do it without just trying to like get after it and go on adventures all the time in this classic, very self-centered dirtbag way. It's in more depth in the book. If you find it satisfying or unsatisfying, I'd love to get an email from you.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Good question.
Thank you.
Oh, we got one over there. Pass the mic. Thanks for coming.
I'm only halfway through the book, so maybe you cover this. Guilt is something that I feel like I've been dealing with the past couple years of like, I only work half the year to save up to like go for a through hike or do something. When one is a lot of people struggling in the world and I can't like donate time to causes that I support, or also like getting invited to weddings that I can't afford to go to, or like flying home. I don't go home for years at a time to see my family so that I can live low cost. And how do you handle kind of like the balance of the guilt? It gives you a lot of freedom to do things. I just got to go on like a family trip that I would have never been able to go on if I had a normal job. But then also I buy my nephew like a thrifted book that I got for a quarter for his birthday. Or like
cool,
not being able
thanks.
to donate to causes locally that I like really care about and I can go and protest. But I'm like, yep, you have me and nothing of the like money to go towards those funds.
The struggle is real. I've been there. I think the slide where I said the dirtbag rich have to be extremely creative and intentional in fulfilling not just these things like healthcare, housing costs, but also it's the social obligation. And I've been lucky in the sense that my family's been pretty chill about my decisions. And I've gotten very little, almost zero browbeating about like, why can't you be here for this? Why don't you participate in this? It's like they're happy to see me when I can show up and be there, and they know not to invite me on some super expensive vacation. Or if they're going to invite me, then we're like going to split costs in a way that's a bit more equitable, so they pay a bit more, I pay a bit less. That's all just been non-controversial. So I do feel super lucky in that regard. When it comes to friends and weddings and stuff, man, I'm not sure how to answer that one. My friends just stopped inviting me to weddings.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Or maybe I'm hanging out with people who are just not getting married that often. These are all super real. I even boil this down to like the brunch conundrum, which is when you have some really good friends who you're visiting in a big city and they're like, let's go out to brunch. And in my head, brunch is like $50. It's like, okay, you want me to spend $50 on food I could happily make myself right here in this kitchen, plus some mimosa or something that I probably didn't want to drink in the first place. Do I want to socially bond with you? Is this worth it?
Yeah.
And one of those teen trips that I ran to Berlin was about creating low-cost good times in the city of Berlin. And so every day for a month, the teens would go out and they would try to find us as many free or cheap things to do in the city as possible. And when they ran out of that stuff, they were like, what can we create? And I feel like that is the skill that it's hard if you're hanging out with people or your established friend group doesn't really value that. Like, let's go create adventures. Like, oh, we live in this beautiful mountain town. We can literally just go for a nice walk and we can have cool conversations and then we can jump into a river. You can do that most of the year, I imagine, with different levels of pain involved. When your form of entertainment, your form of social connection is all bound up with spending money on something that's very difficult. And sometimes you need to drop friends. You need to let certain connections fade away. Hopefully that doesn't leave you alone and isolated and having to like build up a whole social network from the ground up. Every now and then it will. But there are very hard decisions and trade-offs to be made in my experience. Hopefully you don't have to drop your family.
Yeah, no, they're coming around.
Yeah, just keep propagandizing them.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Good.
So I am in a little bit of a transition. I have a full-time job. I kind of come from a dirtbag background. I want to get back to this dirtbag rich. I have a lot of fear around it, though. Right now I am comfortable. I have a paycheck coming in. I have health insurance. how does one overcome that transition, that fear of jumping back in and knowing that you have kind of that safety blanket, you know, like I'm just like, I'm scared right now, right? I'm comfortable, but I don't totally like where I'm at right now. And I want this dirtbag rich. So that fear, overcoming that fear is my question.
Do you have a plan for doing work that's not full-time?
Yeah, I do. Yes, it's in the works, right? I have some freelance stuff going on. And so it will ideally balance out. But I guess it's that initial jump. You know, it's like quitting my job. I've been talking about quitting my job for months. But it's fear-based, I guess, of why I haven't done it yet.
You know, this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I think a big part of the answer is money.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I feel like every year when I'm going to offer some new teen trip, it's like I'm starting a business again from scratch because I don't like repeating trips. I like to have like a new trip that happens almost every year. And sometimes they fill up and sometimes they don't. I think I have like a 2/3 success rate with offering trips that get to that critical mass that will become like profitable versus trips that they get a few applicants and then I have to cancel and say like, sorry, this is not going to work for all of us. And the only way I think I can do that year after year without having a mental breakdown is just having low enough expenses in life and being able to save enough from the trips that I do run that I have a very long runway. And I could probably like not work for 3 to 5 years at this point. And if I continue living the same way that I do now, like probably still be a bit stressed out, but not bankrupt, you know, and not knocking on people's doors and saying like, please, I need you to provide me with stuff so I can live. And so, yeah, the reason I say it's counterintuitive, maybe it's kind of conventional advice for anyone doing a career swap, but it's just having like a really big safety net is actually like very, very helpful.
Sure.
And that's something that classic dirtbags don't have. And I think that leads the classic dirtbag life to feel very insecure at times.
That makes sense.
I think to give you a more specific answer, I'd have to know a bit more about your situation. But I'll just throw that out there. A big pot of money.
Yeah.
And combined with very low expenses, which might mean not having rent to pay.
We live in our camper.
Nice. Step one achieved.
We're working on it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.